Welcome to Eye Opening, where we explore the fascinating world of industrial organizational psychology. Ever wonder how psychology can improve workplace productivity, employee well being, or leadership styles? Well, that's exactly what IO, or Industrial Organizational Psychology, is all about. My name is Oliver, and I'm a second year graduate student pursuing my master's in IO psychology.
And my name is Mcgyver, also a second year graduate student in the IO psychology program here at San Francisco State. In this episode, we're going to be discussing organizational culture.
Have you ever walked into a new workplace and felt like you'd landed on another planet? Or maybe you've worked somewhere for years and still can't quite put your finger on why things are the way they are. Today, we're diving into the often mysterious world of organizational culture. It's an invisible force that shapes everything from how decisions are made to how people interact in the office. It's not just about perks and ping pong tables, it's about the deep seated values, beliefs, and assumptions that guide our workplace. In this episode, we'll explore what organizational culture truly is, how it forms, and most importantly, how you can begin to understand and potentially shape your own workplace culture. We'll be drawing from some fascinating research, including the work of Edgar Schein, Robert Cooke, and Janet Szumal. Let's get started.
So, what exactly is organizational culture? It's more than just a mission statement or a list of values posted on the wall. It's the unwritten rules, the way we do things around here. It's the shared values, beliefs, and assumptions that guide how people act and interact. Edgar Schein, a pioneer in this field, describes it as a multi layered phenomenon. He breaks down culture into three levels: artifacts, espoused values, and underlying assumptions. Think of it like an iceberg. Artifacts are the visible things, the tip of the iceberg, that you see and hear. This includes things like dress code, office layout, the way meetings are run, and even the company logo or slogans. For example, a very formal office space with assigned parking spots and hushed conversations would be an artifact of a more formal culture. Espoused values are the stated goals, strategies, and philosophies of the organization. These are the values that companies say they believe in. They might not be written in a mission statement or annual report, but as Schein notes, these values might not always align with the real lived experience within the company. Underlying assumptions are the unconscious, taken for granted beliefs, perceptions, thoughts, and feelings that are the core of the organization's culture. They're the things people don't even think about questioning because they're so deeply ingrained. For example, the assumption that the customer is always right can drive many aspects of an organization's behavior. Schein points out that these assumptions are the ultimate sources of values and actions.
So, how does culture form? It's not something that appears overnight. It evolves over time through human interaction and shared experiences of a group. It often begins with a founder or a leader who brings their own personal vision, values, and assumptions into the mix. These ideas are then tested through the actions of a group, and if the actions lead to success, these initial individual beliefs become shared. As the group continues to function, the shared experiences lead to shared understanding, and those deeply held assumptions start to drive their actions. It's like the group collectively agreeing that this is the way we do things. Stein argues that this shared understanding shapes the group's identity and impacts their responses in different situations. It's worth noting that these norms are often very subtle and hard to decipher, even for people within the culture. Now, not all organizational cultures are created equal. Robert Cooke and Janet Szumal developed a model that describes cultures as falling into three general categories: constructive, passive defensive, and aggressive defensive. Let's take a look at these in a bit more detail. With constructive cultures, all those who are members are encouraged to interact, cooperate with each other, and achieve their goals. They value things like achievement, self actualization, and humanistic, encouraging behaviors. These are cultures where people are generally positive and supportive of each other. With passive defensive cultures, on the other hand, these are characterized by a need for security, approval, and avoiding any threat. Members might feel they must conform, be dependent on others, and follow rules. Think of organizations where people are very cautious and risk averse. Finally, aggressive defensive cultures are characterized by a focus on tasks, security, and maintaining status. In this type of environment, there may be a lot of competition, opposition, and perfectionism. People often feel they need to compete with each other to get ahead. And So within these three categories, Cooke and Szumal identify specific styles of culture, each with their own norms and values. For example, a conventional culture is very traditional and bureaucratic. A dependent culture is highly hierarchical, and people are expected to follow directions from superiors. An avoidance culture is where members try to avoid responsibility and shift blame when things go wrong. In an aggressive defensive culture, you might see oppositional styles where people actively try to undermine the ideas of others, or a perfectionist style where everything must be done perfectly. It's a really useful way to think about the norms and values that differ across various workplaces. It's also worth briefly mentioning the competing value framework developed by Quinn and McGrath. These describe two dimensions, one relating to the organization's focus, internal versus external, and the other relating to the organization's structure, flexibility versus control. Different organizational cultures are thus oriented towards different values: stability, flexibility, control, or external focus. They also describe that people vary in how they approach situation. For example, some are more spontaneous, while others are more structured, and this can influence their perception and interpretation of information.
So, why does all this matter? Why is it so important to analyze organizational culture? Well, understanding your culture can help you understand why things are the way they are and how that impacts organizational performance, innovation, and even change initiatives. It can shed light on why certain initiatives succeed and why others fail. Edgar Schein's approach to studying culture is what he calls a clinical research model. He emphasizes the need to involve members of the organization in the process, making them part of the data gathering and analysis. It's not about having an outsider come in and tell you what your culture is. It's about working with the people who are already living it. There are several ways to gather data about culture. This includes number one, artifact analysis. This involves analyzing the physical aspects of the organization, like office design and dress codes. These visible artifacts can give clues about what is considered important in the organization. Two, interviews. Conducting individual interviews allows you to explore the individual perspectives of how people feel the organization works. These can be especially useful for understanding how people experience the culture differently. Three, group workshops. Group interviews, also known as workshops, are a fantastic way to uncover the shared assumptions and values that underpin a culture. Here's an example of a structured approach to use in a group workshop. Start by asking newer members what their first impressions of the organization were. This is a good way to start identifying what sticks out for people when they come into the organization. Be sure to record everything mentioned. This ensures that all ideas are captured and can be referenced later. Use categories such as dress codes, behavior with bosses, physical layout, and how time is used to help guide the discussions. The most important part of any cultural analysis is digging below the surface level of artifacts and espoused values. It's about identifying those underlying tacit assumptions that are driving behavior. What do people assume is the best way to succeed here? What do people believe is okay or not okay? It's also important to look for conflicting values or behaviors because they can signal tensions or different subcultures within the broader organization. As Schein's work at various organizations show, even things like how memos are distributed can reveal deeply held, unspoken assumptions about individual autonomy.
So, who shapes culture? Well, it's the combination of history, shared experiences, and significantly leadership. Leaders are the primary drivers of culture. They shape it by what they pay attention to, measure, control, and reward. They also embed their own assumptions through their behavior and how they react to critical incidents and how they recruit and promote. Leaders can embed their assumptions in several ways. The first is consistent action. Through day to day actions, what a leader pays attention to, measures, control, and rewards sends a strong message about the organization's values. If a leader rewards risk taking, that's going to shape a very different culture than if they only reward conformity. There's also role modeling, and this is where leaders shape culture by demonstrating desired behaviors. If leaders want employees to collaborate, they need to model that behavior. There's also reactions to critical incidents, and this refers to how a leader reacts to a crisis or a critical incident, and it can have a huge impact on the culture. Then, of course, there's also hiring and promotion. And this refers to the criteria that are used for recruiting and promoting, and it sends a strong signal about what the organizational values. Now, when it comes to cultural change, there are two basic models described by Schein, a strong vision model and a fuzzy vision model. In the strong vision model, the leader has a very clear vision on where the organization should go and the means of getting there. This can work well when the future is predictable. In the fuzzy vision model, the leader sets the general direction, focusing on the need for change and improvement, but then relies on the organization to develop their own solutions. This can work well in turbulent times when the visionary leader isn't available. But changing culture isn't easy. Deeply ingrained assumptions can be very hard to change because culture is often a defense mechanism against uncertainty and anxiety. When trying to change the culture, people may engage in scapegoating or bargaining or other ways to resist change. Before any new idea can take root, it's necessary to unfreeze the existing assumptions. And this means creating an environment where people recognize the need for change and are willing to let go of old ways of thinking.
What kind of culture should organizations strive for? Many researchers emphasize the importance of creating what is known as a learning culture. A learning culture is characterized by a commitment to open communication, continuous improvement, and a value for truth and learning. What are some key attributes of leaders who can foster a learning culture? Leaders should model behaviors, ask questions and be curious, be able to admit when they're wrong, and be comfortable with ambiguity. Importantly, they involve everyone in the organization in the learning process. They emphasize transparency and information sharing, making it clear that open communication and information sharing is essential to the organization. So, what can you do to analyze and influence your own organizational culture? Here are a few practical tips. First, start by observing artifacts. What does the physical space tell you about the organization? How do people dress? How are meetings conducted? What language do people use? Second, talk to your colleagues. Ask them about their experiences and assumptions. What do they think is important to succeed here? What do they think is okay or not okay? Third, look for inconsistencies. Are there discrepancies between the stated values and what actually happens? Fourth, be mindful of how leaders shape culture. Pay attention to what leaders prioritize, reward, and control. Fifth, identify shared and discrepant causal beliefs by analyzing communications and actions. Are there patterns in the way people explain why things happen? What are the common assumptions they make? Importantly, remember that analyzing and shaping culture is an ongoing process. It requires continuous reflection and a willingness to learn.
We've covered a lot today. We've explored what organizational culture is, how it forms, and how it can be analyzed and changed. Remember, your workplace is more than just a collection of people and tasks. It's a living ecosystem shaped by deeply held assumptions and beliefs. By understanding this, you can start to be a positive influence within it.